Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Renaissance of Pumped Storage Hydropower, an Unsung Hero for a Clean, Resilient Energy Grid. My name is Todd Zaransky, and I will be today's moderator for this exciting and informative session. On behalf of the International Hydropower Association, the National Hydropower Association, and the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, I would like to express our sincere appreciation for your attendance and participation in today's discussion. Tackling climate change is one of the most challenging issues facing the world today. Climate change is impacting the stability of energy grids around the globe, and extreme weather events are accelerating. Central to the imperative to fight climate change is the need for a rapid transition of the electricity sector from fossil fuels to low carbon sources of power. There's no doubt that we will deploy wind and solar power on a huge scale. However, what happens when the sun does not shine and the wind does not blow? These technologies need a low carbon backup, or we will fall back on fossil fuels. We need flexible electricity systems to mitigate these variability challenges, especially stable, reliable storage solutions that can support the grid and avoid curtailing renewable energy when it produces more than the system requires. One critical source of system flexibility is energy storage that can charge when there is an abundance of wind and generate when the sun goes down. The primary source of stored energy on electricity grids today, at well over 90% of energy stored, is pumped storage hydropower, PSH. To secure our net zero ambitions, governments around the world need to address the obstacles to the development of PSH. Planning and permitting needs to be accelerated, and attracting private investment and financing for deployment of PSH requires market arrangements that provide long-term revenue visibility. Fortunately, there's reason to believe that forward progress is being made to address these barriers, and a sense of optimism and momentum is emerging in recognition of the compelling value proposition PSH offers to our energy grids and the energy transition as a whole. Before I introduce our speakers, I will quickly run through some housekeeping items for today's session. All attendees are on mute coming into the webinar today. We encourage you to participate actively by submitting your questions and comments, and our speakers will address as many as possible during our time together today. Last but not least, this recording and slide presentation are being recorded, and the copies of this will be submitted to you following today's session. Our speakers, thank you. Our speakers today are Julia Sauter, CEO of the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, Eddie Rich, CEO of the International Hydropower Association, and Malcolm Wolf, CEO of the National Hydropower Association. Welcome, Julia, Eddie, and Malcolm. All three speakers will offer some brief introductory remarks, then we'll have an interactive discussion, and take some questions from the audience, and close. So without further ado, let's dive into our first presentation. Please join me in welcoming Julia Sauter. Julia.
Thank you, Todd, very much. It's great to be here with our partners. The collaboration is key to address the flexibility needs that Todd outlined. And again, really just want to highlight how pumped hydro storage is the unsung hero, and look forward to working with all of you to really elevate the decades of experience and lessons learned into the clean energy transition that we're moving to very quickly. So want to highlight, as we're all experiencing, as Todd noted, we have a lot of work to do. And again, highlighting the collaborative nature. As you see in this graph, we've got, and I've seen many graphs from IEA and IRENA, the amount of renewable energy that we need to really address the clean energy transition is enormous. We need, as what was called out at COP last year, 11 terawatts of renewable energy by 2030. And we're working on that pathway, but we cannot continue to do this at a 10% increase. We have to be almost double that. And so really, it's really critical for us to look at, how when we have all these renewables coming online, how do we provide that 24/7 certainty, that flexibility, and that reliability that we can with pumped hydro storage? And as we're bringing on this a tremendous amount of renewable energy, we also need to really bring in long duration energy storage to fill in those gaps, to provide that energy shifting. And if you're looking at the next slide, you're seeing that, with this enormous build out of solar and wind and renewables, there are certain components when you get to 30%, how much duration you need of storage at 40%, 50%, at 60%, integration of wind and solar, you're seeing that you need 8 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours, 100 hours of long duration energy storage, providing that reliable, secure, affordable service. And really showing again that this partnership of renewables with long duration energy storage is essential. And what's fabulous is that we're seeing this increase in renewables. We're seeing this need for long duration storage grow. And we're also seeing the investment. We're seeing more and more funding from around the world being invested in long duration storage. And again, this is just the beginning. We need to see a lot more. But just last year, there was over $4 billion invested in LDES technologies. And looking now from building on the partnership of the increased renewable energy, the penetration of renewables that is growing around the world to address decarbonization, the financing for long duration storage, we're now moving into, on the next slide, really showing that we're looking at the diversity of the durations that are needed. And today we're going to be really honing in on mechanical long duration storage, the pumped hydro, the closed loop, the open loop, the liquid air, the compressed air, the gravity-based components. But there are also all the thermal energy storage, a lot of the industrial hard to abate sectors, providing heat, again, our steam, we have electrochemical, all the elements on the periodic table that provide the flow batteries, the different type of anode batteries, again, the elements to provide the services, and then also the chemical hydrogen ammonia. So we have this kind of power to heat, power to X, power to power scenario that we're really trying to address. And again, looking at these 8-hour plus timeframes, the intraday, the weeks, the seasons, the fact that we have solutions that are available today that are in the marketplace that we can have to address the growing renewable energy integration to address the clean energy transition. So again, the diversity of long duration storage is critical, and it's really important that we continue to highlight the unsung heroes like pumped hydro and just the role it plays in decarbonization. And just for everyone's overview, the Long Duration Storage Council really promotes this diversity in the durations. We have this entire ecosystem on the next slide that you can kind of see of our membership. And again, the partnership with NHA and IHA are critical. We have shared members to, again, really work on the urgent need to bring long duration storage into the marketplace. And we're all working together on expanding this $4 trillion marketplace, the savings that can come annually when you bring long duration storage into the market, and also the goals. As we work towards this 11 terawatts of renewable energy, we need to have storage. We need to have, a global energy target that we're working with. We need to have, 8 terawatts of long duration storage by 2040. So these are all critical components that our partnerships and collaborations are working towards as we move towards the urgency of decarbonization. And on the next slide, I mentioned the collaborations, the partnerships. IHA and LDES, with our partnership with NHA, we are part of the Global Renewable Alliance. We have been working really hard with partners to push forward the 11 terawatts of renewable energy. And now we've been working on a 6-fold increase in global energy storage so that we can meet the integration of renewables with a reliable, flexible service of storage, and in particular, long duration energy storage. So it's really critical to kind of build this momentum, have the right policies, the funding in place, and really see pumped hydro as a key part of this transition. And having these global energy storage targets also really continue to push and support the marketplace. And so I want to hand it over to my colleagues, but again, just appreciate the support, the collaboration, the partnership, because we have an enormous amount of renewable energy to bring online, but we have the solutions in place to make it work in our decarbonization economy. So look forward to more conversations from Malcolm and from Eddie, and again, the partnerships to make these targets become a reality and deploy more long duration energy storage. Back to you, Todd. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Over to you, Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And yeah, I've been watching a lot of Olympics, and it feels like we're doing a nice little relay race here. It's an important team to make sure that we are dealing with what we sometimes call the ignored crisis within the crisis, that issue of how to ensure there's backup for wind and solar at the same time as making sure we have storage capacity. And I don't think we're going to achieve decarbonised electricity grids without that. So next slide, please. I think you all know who we in the International Hydropower Association are. For anybody who doesn't, it's nice to meet you. We are the global voice of sustainable hydropower and represent the industry. So if we go on to the next slide, where I'm going to take what Julia has said and try and focus it down on the technology that we're focusing on today, the unsung hero, this pumped storage hydro, or what we sometimes call the world's water battery. And this is going to be a big theme for us over the next year. It really is important to say this is 90% of the stored energy in grid scale applications around the world at the moment. So when people do talk about long duration energy storage, or indeed energy storage as a whole, at the moment, we're very much talking about this proven mass scale technology. And that's why we really want to bring the unsung back into the, or bring the sung back into the unsung. Make people remember not to ignore this technology. Next slide, please. And it's good news on the whole. Things are happening, but the world is waking up. Malcolm's going to talk about what's happening in the US, where there are a huge number of projects potentially in the pipeline. Next, please. We're going to also look at what's been happening in Great Britain, where they've very much identified the need for flexible capacity, but also there are about 13 gigawatts of oven-ready projects to go, waiting for a financial mechanism. France, I mean, it's not a particularly large number, but I want to show it as illustrative of what's happening across Europe, where there's, again, a wake-up to the potential of pumped storage. India, which is exploding into action, and you're seeing an enormous amount getting built around the southern states on pumped storage, and that's partly because they've got their policy environment right. Indonesia, again, illustrative of Southeast Asia, where we're seeing a lot of new activity, which in countries which have potentially been backing up using conventional hydropower. And then next, China, the big show in town, of course, as always. These figures dwarf all the others. And you see that target of 120 gigawatts by 2030. Things are moving there. And then finally, in Australia, where there has been a sort of renaissance, a revolution happening in the need for pump storage to fill the hole left by coal. Next slide. We've been working, as I say, pump storage, big thing for us over the next year, and we're working on a number of activities and materials and events. And what we did last month, we launched the de-risking pump storage guide, which is predominantly a guide for the industry itself, for those people who want to be building this stuff. And it also has some policy recommendations, but it's a real setting out of the risks associated and the pathway towards building a project. So anybody who's thinking about this is an operator, manufacturer, consultant, we recommend this guide to you, available on the IHA website. Next slide. The guide also includes a sort of timeline of all the different stages of a project and the different types of risks associated with that. Next slide. We are working on another guide, which hopefully will be out in the next couple of months. If the de-risking one is predominantly focused on the industry itself, we need to focus on the policymakers. And I'm not going to talk at the detail of this. We can come back to some of this, but the really important message here is the market alone will not deliver these storage solutions. So there has to be government intervention. And a lot of them are saying to our three organizations, okay, we get it, we get the need, but what do we actually do? And this guide is an attempt to answer that, to address the key risks and elements from a policymaker's point of view, which we'll come to a little bit later in the discussion. Next slide, please. We are the three organizations working together on this hard campaign over the next year, and we're delighted to be launching it here today at this webinar. So we're going to have already the de-risking guidance note that I just spoke about. We have this webinar, then the policy guidance note that I just talked about. There is the US National Hydropower Day later this month. We've got the Global Renewables Summit coming up in New York at the end of next month. And at that, we will be launching the Global Energy Storage Target. And that will be done actually on Global Energy Storage Day, which lies within that week, which is the New York Climate Week, and also, as I say, the Global Renewable Summit specifically as an event. Then the Long Duration Energy Storage Council will release their annual report, final quarter of the year. Next year, we will be developing all of these elements, these guidance notes, these targets, which are all the information we're drawing together, the key messages and recommendations into a single manifesto document in April next year. And then this will culminate in the International Forum on Pumped Storage. Next slide, because I'm going to explain a little bit about what that is. So this is a major event, global event, where we hope to bring together the key policy makers, the operators, the manufacturers, the consultants, the financiers, civil society, to talk about what needs to be done to actually bring this to bear, to happen. And this is the second in a series which last time happened online. This time in person, we're going to be able to launch, to push this big event. Next slide, please. And you can all get involved. In fact, this is what we're hoping every single one of you is going to be doing from this meeting. If you can stay in touch with the campaign, go onto our website and look for Pump It Up. Use that campaign hashtag, Pump for Power. Plan your own events around these three big days that we've been talking about, the National Hydropower Day, the Global Energy Storage Day, and the Global Hydropower Day, which actually fell off the previous slide, but it's on the 11th of October. And of course, please do stay in touch with us on all the socials. So my final message, get involved. Thank you. That's back to you, Todd.
Thank you, Eddie. That was great. The floor is yours, Malcolm.
All right. Thanks, Todd. And thanks, Eddie and Julia. It's a pleasure to be here and to be on the same relay team as with you, to take Eddie's Olympics analogy. I guess taking that a little bit further, I feel like we are in a race, both because of climate and because of the speed and scale of the clean energy transition. I don't think anything's inevitable. And so maybe our team name should be Clean Firm. Given the broad global kind of policy engagement that you guys have talked about, as I grab the baton, I feel like maybe I'm doing the, I don't know if it's the anchor leg about how do we get real projects really built. And it is a challenge. Let me start with just an intro on what the National Hydropower Association does in the United States. We represent over 300 companies in North America that ranges from traditional hydropower, run-of-river hydropower, pump storage, and also some really cool marine energy technologies, wave tidal, etc. Overall, we represent about 85% of the generating capacity of water power in the US. We have a specific pump storage development council, which I encourage all of you, if you're not already plugged in, it's open to all of our NHA members. Last count, 353 different folks have signed up for that council. We put out reports, we have monthly coordination calls, we engage on policy advocacy, which I'll talk about in a moment. Barbara Tieran, who's actually here just off camera, is the point person, so please encourage you to coordinate with her. In the interests of speeding along in this relay race, next slide. Quick intro to what the pump storage world looks like in the US currently. Despite all of the attention on batteries, which I love, they're great 2-hour solutions, 4-hour solutions, but 96% of current US electricity storage capacity is still pump storage. We've got over 22 gigawatts of pump storage capacity in the US. But I love Julia's first slide showing just how much new generation was growing. And if we know that most of the growth is going to be in variable renewables, we need that, Team Firm Clean needs something to firm that up. And I think this is a huge opportunity for pump storage. But let me be sober in this conversation. In the United States, the last new major pump storage facility went online in 2004. It's literally been 20 years, a generation, since we built new pump storage in this country. And until recently, it had fallen off the radar screen. But pump storage is having its moment in the US. I think, well, for a lot of reasons we're going to talk about, I think it's an amazing solution for what the US grid needs as we're going through this energy transition. So next slide. I think this is my last slide. And these are growth opportunities using existing infrastructure. And I do want to emphasize that using existing infrastructure. There may be opportunities for closed loop pump storage off river, but we're certainly in the US not talking about major new dams in the lower 48. But something has changed. Last year, going from no new pump storage, we've now got 96 different projects in the pipeline. And again, just to put that in context, I don't expect 96 projects to be built. But if a handful of those projects actually get built, it would be a game changer. And I think it would remind folks about the opportunity to use this proven technology, 91 gigawatts potential. And if you look at this chart, you can see different projects in different areas of development, and it's all throughout the country. And there's a number of really exciting projects that expand existing hydropower, use existing pump storage facilities, add generation to those, leverage existing water storage facilities. The idea that pump storage or hydropower writ large is tapped out is simply not true. So I think there's a lot of investment opportunities, a lot of exciting developments needed so that we can have a firm, reliable, clean grid, and encourage you to plug in with all of the efforts that all three of our organizations are doing. With that, Todd, I will flip it back over to you so we can start our conversation.
That sounds great. Thank you, Malcolm, Eddie, and Julia. So let's just dive in here. What I heard is that from all three of you, there's varying degrees of optimism. I heard Eddie used the term good news to describe growth prospects for PSH. Would love to dive in a bit more on that topic. Why are you excited about PSH? What is encouraging?
Who wants to go first?
We're all excited about it.
I'll jump in because I can't help myself. From my perspective, there's three major things that are happening now. First and foremost, we're seeing the effects. I think this, our friends and family are seeing the effects of climate change. So the urgent need to deal with the climate crisis changes the conversations. In the United States, for example, we've got a very deliberate conversation with environmental groups, with tribal nations that never would have been possible, but for the recognition that the climate change is upon us now. The energy transition is forcing the need for more variable renewables. Great, but we need to somehow firm that up. So I think that kind of climate, political, real-world reality is one reason why I'm excited, because I think pump storage is a natural solution for what the grid needs. In the United States, I'm also excited because we now have some federal tax support. In the Inflation Reduction Act, enacted almost 2 years ago at this point, it included a tax credit for all forms of energy storage, and pump storage is included in that. So it's great that it's technology neutral, let the best technology win. Lots of forms of long duration energy storage, but pump storage is a great solution, and a 30% investment tax credit goes a long way to leveling the playing field and making these technologies viable. And I guess the third Well, the third reason in my mind is the increased penetration of variable renewables. As we're getting more and more renewables on the grid, we need to balance them up. I think in the United States, and I think globally, a lot of pump storage was built to balance out nuclear 30, 40 years ago. We had excess load, excess generation at night. We could use that excess load, pump up to refill the reserves, and then release it during the day when we were having peak demand. In a lot of places in the country, it is exactly flipped now. Now we've got excess generation during the day in California. They are pumping up during what used to be peak hours of midday when you've got maximum solar production. That's when we can pump up our pump storage and release it at night to firm up when the sun sets and the solar goes away. So those are three drivers that I see of market growth for pump storage and why I'm excited.
Thanks. Perhaps if I can pick that up at that point, because I agree with all of those points, and I want to sort of perhaps illustrate it with an example. I always think of the story about how our President Malcolm Turnbull got involved in the first place. When he was Prime Minister of Australia, they were sort of ramping down the coal, and they relied more and more on solar, and there was a period of what they call Sturmflaute, where there was very low sun and no wind coming through. So they actually in South Australia began having minor blackouts, and this caused an absolute horror across Australia, this concern. And he grabbed hold of that issue and said, well, what are the solutions out there? How can we store energy? How can we make sure that as we ramp down coal, we're filling that hole left by coal? And he found out about pump storage and went to visit Snowy Hydro 1, where there was an existing facility, and said, well, how can we make this bigger? And they said, well, somewhere in one of these filing cabinets, we've got some plans which were written up 30 years ago. And so they find this old filing cabinet in a corner of the storage room. They blow off the dust from the top of it, and then they say, right, is this what you were looking for? And he'd had to look at it and go, yeah, why isn't this happening? And they said, well, it's all too difficult. You've got to understand the finances is very, very complicated. And even as a right of centre politician, he said, right, okay, well, then the federal government is going to buy this asset and make this happen. Now, I think that story is illustrative of what you're seeing across the world, where politicians are getting freaked by the idea that, yes, we have to move to decarbonise. And yes, we want more and more solar power. We want more and more wind power. And we have to move away from fossils. But we do have to find that filler. And that is the solution, which is, as we've already expressed, the dominant technology at the moment. We want the other technologies to come along. We absolutely do. We want a lot of research and development. But there's plenty of room in this game. That we need a lot more storage, and pump storage absolutely can be leading that charge.
Todd, I know you have some questions, but I just want to weave in a couple of points here, because the multi-purpose aspect also of pumped hydro with floating solar, with even different types of durations of longitudinal storage, the 8-hour, 24, 100-hour, there's these partnerships that are starting to be created because the efficiencies and technology improvements from what's been known and kind of advancing. And I think it's really important to kind of look at the public-private partnership to build in one of the questions that was asked by one of the colleagues calling in on Eddie's point about earlier, the revenue visibility, and to Malcolm's Wolf points about, the tax credits. These are all tools that work and that we need to keep making sure that we continue to support and build from, because what we're seeing, just for another example, in the US, the U.S. Department of Energy announced funding and partnerships for projects, and one of the ones that won in the bids was a pumped hydro project, that's in the Midwest. And so this is evolving and happening. And again, we have to continue to push forward, the different creative toolkits that we have for blended finance, for partnerships, and for planning and permitting. That inclusivity is also really important. That the stakeholder voices from all the players need to be incorporated to push this forward faster.
Well, thank you, Julia. Just a note to our participants, please keep those questions coming. We are keen to answer them. Let me take a privilege here and ask the next question. PSH needs policy support and incentives to move forward. What governments and regulatory bodies have been standouts in this effort? And I'm thinking we can start with Eddie and then go over to Malcolm.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as I said, the market won't deliver this by itself. The market is very, very good, as we know, at rewarding electricity generation. It's not so good at the storage and the reliability. In other words, you get paid for when you turn the light on, but you don't necessarily get paid for making sure the light will come on. It's knowing that it will come on. So you do need to build mechanisms. I think I mentioned before that when I look around liberalized economies, what India is doing is really cutting edge. I find this at the forefront. There's some very interesting stuff also happening in Australia and US and other places in Europe. But India has picked up on almost all the aspects. They've first of all done the long-term planning to model how much variable renewables are going to come onto the system. Therefore, over the longer term, how much long duration energy storage they're going to need to back that up and get the most from it, which then made them establish mandates for hydropower in general. So a certain amount of new electricity had to come from hydropower. And then they established the guarantee of long-term prices, so that if a private investor came in, they would know that the price would not fall below a certain price as long as they continued to store it or develop it. And they also help with some of the initial setup costs, because of course these are high capital costs. Then they established all sorts of mechanisms to support all the other services that pumped storage provides. Its capacity or inertia, and also some of the other aspects of flood control, of irrigation, and making sure that all of these aspects were rewarded through a very gentle government intervention has allowed the market to really work. So pump storage has been enabled. And we see elements of that in many other markets, but the Indians have got it all together.
That's really interesting. I'm going back, Eddie, to where you started your answer, which is that markets will not deliver a solution by itself. I hadn't heard it framed quite like that before. I think in the United States, that would be a controversial statement. I don't think folks, we are so focused on markets, thinking markets is the solution. But I'd welcome that debate, because I agree 100%. We're not seeing markets develop that solution. We haven't built any in 20 years. And actually, when you see how government's actually acting, I'm not sure folks would admit that in the United States that markets aren't going to deliver the solution, but they recognize that it's true and are taking some action in light of that. I mentioned the 30% tax credit that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's actually even more if you can meet various qualifications. If you promise to build with a certain amount of domestic content, if you build in certain energy communities, you can get an even higher tax credit. So the government is definitely putting its finger on the scales. Moreover, we realize that there's all of these challenges to getting it built. So the federal government has used some of the money from the bipartisan infrastructure law to encourage development in certain communities. So there's a former coal site in Kentucky, the Lewis Ridge Project, where the government has just announced tens of millions of dollars to help do the initial upfront work in evaluating that site's development. I think there needs to be a greater recognition of the government role, and maybe it starts from a reframing. I'm an energy guy, and I've spent my career on sustainable energy, but what we're talking here is infrastructure. These are forever assets that are going to live for 100 years. They're going to shape communities. In so many places, the communities have been built around them because you built the reservoir and now you've got recreation and all these other benefits. If we think of this as infrastructure for the greater community good, electricity is a public good. We want a reliability 24/7. Thinking about it as an infrastructure project rather than trying to finance it like a energy project that's only going to be around for 10 or 15 years. Very different dynamic, very different government role, and maybe we need to figure out how to reframe it to get more support for that government role. Julia, thoughts?
And Malcolm, on the reframing part, I completely agree with you because we need the targets that Eddie was speaking to. Targets, mandates make sense. They work. They set that certainty. They start the platform moving forward. And when you build in incentives that highlight community benefits and other kind of partnerships, you bring the whole package together. So it really is important that we have the targets, state targets, country targets, global targets, and specifically for durations of energy storage, because this is so important for the marketplace and for the government partnership. So just want to highlight again that this, again, that creative package that we're all working towards needs these essential tools, the mandates, the markets, and the incentives.
Thank you all. Thank you. Keep the questions going here. As the webinar title suggests, PSH is critical to a clean, reliable energy grid. How do you see the discussion around the disruptions and new challenges emerging from climate change affecting the discussion on PSH?
The part of the innovation that's happening too is that it's building on a lot of the amazing experience and expertise of pumped hydro. I mean, we have members that are doing really phenomenal things in gravity, just building on the knowledge and expertise, and just highlighting again that there's a value add here, and that it's proven, it's known, and it works, it's reliable. And I would also bring in the fact that this again, this trifecta of the policies, the partnerships, and the financing, to really keep this going forward. There are people are asking about what kind of other incentives and infrastructure. A lot of areas that have smaller pumped hydro that want to get larger, or just even have opportunity using existing infrastructure like mining, even fossil fuel assets and existing transmission lines. There's different ways to bring brownfield and greenfield into the planning that we need to have too. So I just would highlight that there's a lot of processes that we can be more kind of cohesive on to make sure that we start addressing the urgency faster. So coordinated planning, you bringing in innovations with incentives, and again, those mandates on the partnership piece.
I've got two thoughts I'd like to add on the climate change piece of it. I guess first I'll double down on the infrastructure. We know that climate change is water change. We know that there's going to be more, at least particularly in the US out west, there's going to be more rain, there's going to be less snow. What that means is we're going to have more floods and then more droughts. More floods in the spring, more droughts in the summer. So we need to be thinking about climate adaptation, and that is classic infrastructure. You may need more dams to deal with flooding. You may need more water storage in order to deal with this. How do you pay for those infrastructure? Pump storage. Hydropower can be a way to offset those costs. Second thought I want to address is the tragic photos that I assume many of you have seen of the Colorado River. That river basin is overtaxed, has been since its creation, but it's created the misperception that hydropower could be running out of water. And that's not the case. That's not even the case in the West, in the US West, in the mega drought. There was a study done by the US National Labs about a year or so ago. It found that hydropower in the West during the summertime mega drought is still at 80+% capacity factor. The pictures from the Colorado River are the exception. We've had, the reservoirs in California have refilled with the atmospheric rivers. The weather's an inherently local thing, and I don't want the global audience here to get the perception that because of the problem and really the overtaxing of the Colorado River, That is a localized problem in a big region, but it's not representative of the resource globally or even the resource in the US West during this mega drought.
Perhaps if I can just add, I really like you doubling down on the infrastructure. You're right. I mean, as we see more droughts, we see more floods, the answer is going to be, whether we like it or not, more water infrastructure. And why not power it, as you say? If you're going to do it, why not power it? Pump storage is particularly good because it stores the water away from the rivers. And that has the additional advantage, and of course can be used as appropriate for other purposes, for irrigation, for tourism, and all sorts of other fisheries and other aspects. It is weird, isn't it? I mean, the only time the hydropower sector gets most noticed is when there's not enough of it. And then people say, hey, there's a problem with hydropower. And they go, so we can't rely on it. And you're thinking, yeah, but you just said the problem is not enough of it, not too much of it. So we've got to try and reframe the debate that, yeah, we're not the ones who want to build the infrastructure, but it is going to be needed. And we're going to do it well, which can help with clean energy solutions. And we can do it in a climate resilient way. And I do encourage people to, again, go onto a website. There is a climate resilient guide for hydropower, which is an important document alongside the whole set of hydropower sustainability standard requirements to make sure that the infrastructure we are building today is suitable and fit for the future.
I like that, Eddie, that we have the infrastructure, Bill and Malcolm's point, that the market's not going to do it all, and we need incentives and these partnerships to keep it going. But we have the solutions today, so we just need to make sure that the foundation's there for us to continue to provide value through pumped hydro storage.
Great. Thank you all. Just to our participants, please keep those questions coming, and we'll keep those answers rolling. The next one, let's see here. One challenge in developing PSH is what I'd call the time lag challenge. Building PSH facilities can take a decade or longer. How should we think about navigating around this challenge?
I'm not sure
I'll start
there
just
is.
by echoing. Go ahead, Eddie.
Okay. Good. No, you go, Malcolm.
Having started, I'm now wishing I had a better answer. It is a real challenge. We've got, just to be very specific, we've got at least 3 projects in the United States that have been fully permitted, which itself is a nightmare that we're working on to try to streamline. We've got active proposal in the US Congress trying to get it down to 3 years for qualifying pump storage. But even once you navigate the gauntlet that is permitting in the United States, then you've got the construction schedule. And from my understanding, financing using kind of some of the existing models that we're used to doing for energy financing, power purchase agreements, long-term offtake agreements, that's great. But if you're going to be building a data center and the power is not going to be constructed for a decade, that timing doesn't work. It doesn't work with the realities of the market. And I think that's where there's a market failure, and that's where there's the need for the government to bridge that gap. So that there's some financing either during the construction schedule or different kind of financing models or much more patient capital that can understand and relate to the construction schedule. I think we've got lots of innovations in the technology. I think we need more innovation in the finance space. Pigeonholing us into the models for other energy projects just doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Malcolm. You put it very well. There aren't any easy answers on this, and we look a lot at these issues in the de-risking guidance to try and establish, what bits of this can we streamline, what bits of it can we foresee in advance to make sure that we're not taking problem after problem in sequence, but instead trying to plan for all of them to make sure that you're not getting around each obstacle. streamlining of licensing is something that the Global Renewables Alliance more broadly has done a lot of work on. And they've produced some pretty good documentation on guidance notes for policymakers on how that can be shortened. I think when you look at that specifically from the hydropower sector, we would very much encourage all companies and all governments to align their licensing requirements, at least on the ESG side, with the Hydropower Sustainability Alliance. It's the internationally recognized approval mechanism, and it is a very powerful document brought in by, and standard, I should say, brought in by civil society and by governments, by financiers together, and it qualifies people for green bonds and so on. So I think it's really important that that sort of gets embedded within government's licensing and permitting procedures to speed the process up.
Yeah, your parallel pathways approach that we've all commented on is key. Like, this is not A plus B equals C. It's A, B, 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 C, C, C. Like, get this going so that you can really kind of maximize your time. And really want to reiterate Malcolm and Eddie's points about that inclusive planning. These are large projects that with a lot of voices and a lot of jobs. And it's really important to have support from the beginning, and really being inclusive about all the different attributes is key. So upfront conversations, which many of the companies are already doing, will continue on, really helps the process speed up too.
Well, thank you all. Question came in for Eddie on the guidance note on de-risking PSH. Can you give us a bit of 3 big takeaways, for instance, on that analysis, Eddie?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to bring in my, if you allow me, Todd, my colleague Rebecca Ellis, who led the working group, because this was not an IHA alone project, but a whole wider set from across industry on building together this document. So, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you so much, Todd. Just to clarify a few things, so it was a 12-month multi-stakeholder coalition. One of our core aims is to develop a guide for which any key stakeholders, be it those who had little knowledge, those who have a large amount of knowledge, would be able to take it and use it and ask themselves questions, and to make sure that we're answering that big question around, can we make sure that projects are delivered at pace? Because one of the biggest issues facing hydropower, as well as pumped storage hydropower projects, is that projects are not getting to final investment decision. And when they do, there's that long tail of cost and schedule overruns. So some of the critical things that we looked at were 3 thematic areas, including markets and revenue considerations, including those that policymakers might wish to consider, recognizing that projects probably need that public sector to recognize the importance of these infrastructure projects, but that the private sector is ready and willing to develop these projects. We also looked at risks facing project development, and especially around allocation of risk. These are big infrastructure projects, so there's a lot of recommendations on how to mitigate risks for these 3 areas. And that timeline really breaks down the 3 key thematic areas in terms of what you need to be thinking about when. And a critical consideration therein is thinking about your procurement strategy, for example, how you're supporting your risk strategy, and really getting your team in as early as possible, so that you can best de-risk the project. Some of our critical recommendations and conclusions include that owners should invest in project development early and upfront de-risk, especially around issues like geotech. You don't know what's in the ground until you start digging, as we all know here, and ensuring those well-coordinated teams to support interface risk mitigation. And we recognize that risk is a really critical consideration. So we have a lot of strategy and discussions around that. And we want it to be an interactive guide. So there are questions across each of these 3 thematic areas that, as a person is going through, they can be asking themselves to make sure they understand what they need to do. So that's a quick overview of a very lengthy, well, not lengthy document. It's only 40 pages. And in addition to the guide, there is a project log document which highlights a lot of more technical documents. And why I say 40 pages is short, I had the great pleasure of sifting through some 500-page documents at a time to determine the merit of including them. So that's why I say 40 pages is quite short in comparison. So please do have a look. I have shared a link to the guide, and happy to take follow-up questions via email.
Well, a lot of great information packed in those 40 pages, that's for sure. Thanks, Rebecca. Got a great question from participants. Basically, just to kind of just to mention that this participant's interested in understanding more about how PSH projects can be integrated into existing infrastructure. Does that mean brownfield versus greenfield sites, or does that mean planning around existing transmission infrastructure? Maybe just a general question that we can open up to the panel for thoughts.
When I was saying that, I was thinking about, in particular, using existing dams. We know that dams serve multiple purposes. In the United States, for example, we've got 90,000 dams, less than 3% have power generation. So are there opportunities for pump storage using the existing infrastructure, using the existing reservoirs? And a number of pump storage projects that are going forward in the United States are leveraging that. Either they're adding a new powerhouse to an existing pump storage facility, or they're looking at water storage, existing water storage impoundments where they can use pump storage or add pump storage. So I think leveraging that existing infrastructure avoids a lot of the environmental concerns and therefore speeds up the regulatory approval and funder interest.
And I mentioned using existing or abandoned mines. There's a lot of infrastructures out there just have existing reservoirs already set up too.
Yeah, I mean,
Todd,
in Australia, they're just the Kidston mine, which was a former gold mine, is now been converted into pump storage. That's an example of how it can be done. I think the general basic principle of let's see what can be updated is a good one, making sure it is close where possible to grid infrastructure. But on the other hand, don't let anybody ever tell you there's not enough, sites.
Yeah.
Whether it's brownfield or greenfield. The Australian National University have done a study of all the off-river potential sites, away from population, away from protected areas, and they have identified topologically over 600,000 potential sites around the world. Now, if only 1 in 100 of those, to take Malcolm's point earlier on about, not all of these will be built, but if only a small amount is built, that is still enough storage for around the world. So don't, please, ever allow people to get away with the statement, oh, the sites are too difficult. They're not.
Todd, I'd love the opportunity to address one of the other questions real quickly in the chat.
Please.
I think this is from someone from Ontario who asked, well, how do the costs of pump storage compare to battery storage? And I thought it's a great question because that's the real world question that developers get all the time. I'd love to hear, Eddie and Julia, your reaction, but my initial reaction is to reject the premise of the question, that they're serving very different purposes, that presumably the pump storage is going to last for many decades. If you a battery storage, great solution, but typically they're great 2-hour, 4-hour solutions. Sure, if you build enough of it, you can build more and more and more duration, but you've got the scale issue, and then you've got the replacement factor. My electric vehicle I'm already seeing the degradation in its fuel. You're gonna be replacing that battery storage device, I don't know how many times, 5-7 times over the life of a 100-year pump storage facility. And when we're doing those costs, if you think about it as infrastructure, you wouldn't be comparing an infrastructure project to an asset that's not long duration. Do you guys have a different take or other thoughts?
It's like comparing apples to zebras, I like to say. You need both because we need different durations for different
That's right.
types of events, and we have to plan better and we need to model better. And so I think this question's great because it starts a dialogue to say we need the 10-hour, the 24, the 12-hour. And so you need to make sure that in the modeling, you're looking at these different attributes because some are 50-year assets and some are 20-year assets. So again, that diversity is critical, but I agree with you, Malcolm, that it's again comparing apples to zebras. So we've got to, yeah, it's a whole other conversation we're going to have on modeling and different attributes for pumped hydro. Eddie.
Now, Todd, I know we're getting very close to the end, but I do want to come in on this because I obviously agree with what Malcolm and Julia said. The problem from a policymaker's point of view, of course, is that they have a need to deliver storage quickly. And the temptation is to bring in the storage which is quick rather than the storage that is going to last, or the storage that is going to be appropriate to different type of situation. So you're going to bring the apple solution to the zebra problem. And I think that's goes back to the need for governments to take that long-term planning and build up the right enabling. I wouldn't even use incentivizing, right enabling policies to get this stuff built.
Well, thank you all. And looking at time, the time has really flown by. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I've learned a bunch of things. I'm happy to admit. Let's move now to closing remarks. Maybe we'll keep the order. Julia, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Just building on the themes about blended finance packaging. These are long-term assets that really provide long-term value, and that revenue visibility is really important. The inclusive planning and partnership with these parallel pathways are essential to make sure that we get long-duration storage built to decarbonize, and that we really need to take action with these public-private partnerships to bring on the value of what's already been proven and demonstrated to decarbonize. So I just want to thank Malcolm and Eddie and the teams behind really working on bringing us together to speak to the critical role of the unsung hero and how to make sure that pumped hydro is a hero again.
Thank you, Julia.
So from my side, I don't want to take up any more time. Just please join the campaign, make a noise. We have been, this has been an ignored and unsung technology. It's time to shout it from the rafters, and this is the way to do it. And I hope to see every single one of the 100 and plus people on this line at the International Forum in Paris in June next year. Thank you.
I'll guess I'm the last leg of this relay, just to reinforce the points that Julia and Eddie made. Join our respective campaigns. We're all doing really good complementary work together. If you're interested in the North American market, definitely give me or my colleague Barbara a shout, plug you into our Pump Storage Council. We all know this is a proven technology that's a great solution for what the clean energy transition needs. Thinking about it as infrastructure, maybe help reframe how maybe governments look at it and provide some of the market fixes that we need. There were some really good questions in the chat as well. We'll try to answer them. I know there was a great study done by one of the U.S. national labs that found that pump storage was the lowest, or at least one of the lowest of all of the life cycle cradle to grave carbon technologies. When you look at that, it was because of the mining impacts. So there are some great published studies that are already out there. So plug in and you'll find out about all these resources as they come out. And thank you to my colleagues for putting this on, and Todd for doing a great job moderating. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us today and for your active participation. We hope you found the discussions on the value of PSH insightful and informative. A special thanks to our speakers, Julia, Eddie, and Malcolm, for sharing their insights and expertise. We hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next engagement soon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks
Thank you.
all.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks all. Bye.
Have a great day. Ciao.